It is one of the most famous opening shots on film.
Singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling, we're happy again.
And in the middle of the cloudburst, a star is born. The girl in the big galoshes, Debbie Reynolds, marching through the raindrops and into our hearts. The story of her early career leading up to that movie is so incredible, we'll let her tell it herself. Here she is in an appearance that aired just last year during the Screen Actors Guild Awards.
I was only 16 and still Mary Frances Reynolds when I entered the Miss Burbank contest. I did it as a lark to get a blouse and a scarf that they were giving away to all the contestants. Well, as fate would have it, in a year, I was under contract to the biggest studio in Hollywood.
She was born Mary Frances Reynolds in El Paso, Texas. Her father later moved the family to California. Her aspirations at the time might surprise you.
My mother grew up in Burbank, went to Burbank High, was a batonist and 27 merit badges in the Girl Scouts. She thought she was going to be a gym teacher.
Fortunately for all of us, she wound up making movies instead. That first leading role came when she was just 19.
Good morning, it's great to stay up late.
She had never danced professionally.
She always said Gene Kelly never liked her because he wanted a professional dancer in that part. He didn't want to work with a beginner.
MGM gave her a 3-month crash course, and then it was up to her to hold her own without falling on her face.
Not basically a dancer, thrown into this part as the ingenue in it, and boy, she kept up with them.
She was a revelation. She was really young. It was sort of like when we saw Jennifer Lawrence for the first time, and she was just so amazing and breathtaking, and we fell in love with her.
There would be other movies, more than 30 of them. In 1955, she was the girl who caught Frank Sinatra in The Tender Trap.
We could go to the License Bureau and be married and then have a baby and have another baby in the country.
Todd Fisher says between takes, his mom got some sage advice from Sinatra.
He said, whatever you do, Debbie, do not marry a singer.
Reynolds ignored Sinatra's warning. She married a crooner named Eddie Fisher, who was famous for serving up pop, both carbonated and musical, on his television show Coke Time.
May I sing to you?
The newlyweds shared the bill in the musical Bundle of Joy in 1956.
Would it interest you to know I'm not the mother?
Reynolds was the mother in real life. She was already pregnant during filming with their first child, daughter Carrie. A son, Todd, followed 2 years later. Reynolds' screen credits included some serious dramatic parts, like The Catered Affair in 1956.
I'll never forget the look on her face when I told her we weren't having a big wedding. I'll never forget the way she looked. Like I'd hit her in the face.
The high notes came in films where she played the good girl, such as Tammy and The Bachelor.
Tammy, Tammy, Tammy's in love.
The title song became a hit record, but even with those successes, her talent was underappreciated.
And I don't think it's been until kind of after the fact that people have looked at her work and said, oh my God, she was great.
When a contract dispute kept Shirley MacLaine from playing the unsinkable Molly Brown, Debbie threw herself into the role.
I'm gonna learn to read and write.
Her favorite role was Molly Brown.
Why did she like that one so much?
Because it's her. My mother is Molly Brown. She loved that part. She wanted that part. She fought for that part. She got the part. She knocked it out of the park.
It also brought her an Academy Award nomination.
Debbie Reynolds in The Unsinkable Molly Brown.
Although it was Julie Andrews who took home the Oscar for Mary Poppins. Between projects, Reynolds began making stage appearances in Las Vegas. This black and white photo, widely shared on social media, shows a 6-year-old Carrie watching her mother perform in Las Vegas in the early 60s.
Now go to sleep.
Memorably, Reynolds was the voice of the kind and nurturing spider in the 1973 animated classic Charlotte's Web.
What is your name, please?
My name is Charlotte. Charlotte A. Cavatica.
I have a delicious surprise. It's a very special cake. I want you kiddies to have the first piece.
But this was her iconic role, and this may have been her iconic song.
Good morning, good morning. We've gabbed the whole night through. Good morning to you.
Nothing could be grander than to be in Louisiana.
If you think you've heard that tune recently, you may be right.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night.
It lives on as the jingle for Tropicana orange juice. As with so many Hollywood lives, however, it was something that happened off-screen that drew the most attention.
Theirs was a very famous marriage, and it was a very famous divorce.
Reynolds and Fisher were close friends with Elizabeth Taylor and her husband. But when he died in a plane crash, Eddie began comforting the future star of Cleopatra and didn't stop.
If you can think of the most popular and buzzed about tabloid stories of our day, Brangelina or Kim and Kanye, this story was 3 times that in magnitude.
They were the golden couple of their era. And so when he left her for Elizabeth Taylor very publicly, all of the sympathy in the entire world went to Debbie Reynolds. Not just because she had been left by her husband and she was a beloved movie star, but also he had left her for Elizabeth Taylor, who was like Jezebel.
There was an awkward encounter between the women at a fundraiser in 1965.
And the presence of Debbie and Elizabeth Taylor at the same affair led to some nervous anticipation.
There would be serious financial difficulties for Reynolds and 2 more failed marriages.
Who has had more public difficulties than my mother? She's been through husbands and fortunes. If it wasn't for the husbands, she wouldn't have been through the fortunes. But she's ridden it all out with amazing grace and all in the public eye.
From Hollywood to Broadway and then Vegas.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Debbie Reynolds.
Where by the 1970s, she was making appearances like this one with Liberace.
Your love is lifting me. It's on destiny. Your love is lifting me higher, higher.
But it is her early work, those Technicolor, melt-in-your-mouth cinematic confections that will stand the test of time.
Ladies and gentlemen, stop that girl. That girl running up the aisle, stop her. That's the girl whose voice you heard and loved tonight. She's the real star of the picture.
Debbie is really the last of an era. She's our last star from that era of the 40s and 50s. She's our last connection to Singing in the Rain, maybe the best musical ever made.